Just let that sink in for a moment. That's the chilling, calculated logic of one of America's most prolific serial killers. And the scariest part? For nearly 2 decades, he was right. But there was a clue, a tiny one, hidden in plain sight, just waiting for science to finally catch up. So you might think this is just the story of the Green River Killer, but it's so much more than that. As we're about to see, this is really the story of a revolutionary technology, a hunt that spanned 20 years, and a justice system that was pushed to its absolute breaking point. Okay, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the predator himself and the incredible scientific promise that was supposed to stop him. Then we'll dive into that 20-year hunt and all the systemic failures that made it take so long. And finally, we'll see how this one case forced the entire system to take a hard look in the mirror. All right, so our story really kicks off with these two powerful forces on a collision course. On one side, you have a predator hiding in plain sight, and on the other, you have a scientific promise that was about to change literally everything. So, on one hand, you've got Gary Ridgway. From 1982 to 1998, he murdered dozens of women, specifically targeting those he believed society just wouldn't miss. He was a ghost, but at the exact same time, we're seeing the dawn of DNA technology. This incredible new tool didn't just promise to identify killers with pinpoint accuracy, it could also protect the innocent. The big question was, could the promise catch the predator? Well, this collision, it kicked off one of the longest, most frustrating, and most urgent manhunts in American history. Now, what's just wild about this timeline is the sheer amount of time we're talking about. The horror starts in '82. Just 5 years later, police are suspicious enough of Gary Ridgway to take a saliva sample. You'd think that's it, right? But nothing happens. He keeps killing for another decade. It wasn't until 2001, a full 14 years after they had his DNA, that a cold hit finally connected him to the murders. How is that even possible? Well, the answer lies in that one sample. It was an unseen clue, just sitting in an evidence locker, waiting for a revolution to happen inside a test tube. So what was this clue? It was DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. Basically, it's the unique genetic blueprint inside every living thing. It's in our blood, our saliva, our skin, and when left at a crime scene, it's the ultimate biological calling card, unique to every single person on Earth. And this is the absolute crux of it. When police collected Ridgway's saliva back in 1987, they were literally holding the killer's calling card. The problem? The technology to actually read it properly, it just didn't exist yet. The science was too new, the methods too basic. So for 14 years, the key to solving America's biggest serial murder case was just sitting on a shelf. But here's where the story gets even more complicated. You see, waiting for technology to catch up was only part of the problem. The real delay, the real bottleneck, came from a system that was completely and utterly overwhelmed. And that brings us to the central question of this whole explainer. It wasn't just about the science. Why, even after the technology was ready to go, did it still take so long? The answer reveals a hidden crisis that was crippling crime labs all across the country. Take a good look at this number, 350,000. That was the estimated backlog of DNA evidence from rape and homicide cases, what they call casework samples, just sitting in evidence freezers waiting to be tested. Ridgway's sample was just one drop in a massive ocean of unanalyzed clues. And this chart really lays out the two sides of the crisis. On one side, you have that massive backlog of evidence from active crime scenes. But on the other side, you have another 300,000 samples from convicted offenders that were just waiting to be entered into the national database. The system was drowning from both ends, too many clues coming in and not enough known profiles to compare them against. And the consequences of this, they were absolutely terrifying. A Department of Justice report highlighted this case in Florida, where a convicted rapist was linked to a murder just 8 days before he was scheduled to be released on parole. And this wasn't a one-off thing. Every single untested kit represented a potential future victim, another family destroyed, all while a solvable case went cold. But the backlog was only one systemic failure. The other was just as big a problem: a deep-seated inability for police departments to talk to each other. This allowed killers like Ridgway to operate in the shadows for years. The term for this is information silos, and it's a perfect visual. Just imagine every police department, every jurisdiction, as its own separate tower, hoarding its own information with no bridges connecting them. A clue found in one city could solve a murder in another, but if that information isn't shared, the connection is never made. Researchers call this breakdown the pathologies of police information flow. Things like the digital divide, where one department's computers literally can't talk to another's, or linkage blindness, which is when a killer crosses a county line and suddenly the pattern is completely missed by both agencies. Then there's just plain old bureaucracy or institutional friction. And maybe the most toxic of all is intelligence hoarding, when an officer protects a clue for their own personal glory instead of sharing it to solve a case. The Green River case exposed all of these failures in the harshest light possible. The fallout forced the entire justice system to finally confront these problems and begin the long, difficult process of rebuilding itself. The response was a massive national initiative. First, they throw money at the problem, over $90 million just to clear the backlogs. Second, they funded a complete overhaul of the labs, bringing in automation, robotics, the whole 9 yards. Third, they invested in R&D to make DNA testing faster and cheaper. And finally, and maybe most importantly, they started training everyone in the system, from the cop on the beat to the judge on the bench, on how to actually use this powerful evidence correctly. You know, in the end, catching Gary Ridgway was a huge triumph for DNA technology. But the fact that he was free for decades, that was a stark, terrifying warning. It proved that having the most advanced tool in the world means nothing if the system holding it is broken. The real challenge was never just inventing the technology, but building a justice system that was actually worthy of using it.